China is seeing red over the Modi government's app ban. On Wednesday, India blocked 118 more apps, the most prominent amongst these being the popular gaming app PUBG. China says the blocking of apps violates the rights of Chinese investors and has asked India to reconsider the ban. Is Beijing finally beginning to feel the heat?
The Narendra Modi government's decision to ban an additional 118 mainly Chinese apps has sent shockwaves through China, sparking protests from the Chinese Commerce Ministry. But the United States has welcomed the move wholeheartedly, urging other freedom-loving countries and companies to work towards a clean system online. The Chinese Foreign Ministry issued a stern statement strongly opposing the move. Indian actions violate the legal interests of Chinese investors and services providers, and China asks India to correct its mistakes, Commerce Ministry spokesperson Jiao Feng said. Shares of the Chinese gaming and social media giant Tencent Holdings has fallen more than 2% after India banned 118 Chinese apps, including popular mobile game PUBG. The move comes as a major blow, as India ranks #1 in terms of PUBG downloads, with 17 million PUBG installations in India alone, 24% of the total downloads worldwide. India had in June banned 59 Chinese apps on similar grounds of illegal data mining and for being detrimental to the country's sovereignty and integrity. The market valuation of TikTok fell from $100 billion in May 2020 to about $50 billion, a massive fall of 50% in just 2 months, according to a report by the Observer Research Foundation.
The activities that these apps have engaged in are prejudicial to the sovereignty and integrity of India, defense of India, to the security of state and public order.
The United States wholeheartedly welcomes India's move, coming out strongly in favor of the Chinese app ban. A US statement quoting Keith Cratch, US Undersecretary of State for Economic Growth, said, India has already banned 100+ Chinese apps. We call on freedom-loving nations and companies to join the clean network.
Analysts say the decision to ban 118 Chinese apps sends out signals at multiple levels, domestically, to China and to the world at large. Domestically, it protects Indian users from Chinese data mining and trolling. Internationally, it compels other countries to protect their citizens and take similar action against Chinese apps. To China, it sends out a very strong message. The valuation of Chinese companies go down. TikTok, for example, went down by 50% just in 2 months. And China will be forced to choose transgressions at the line of actual control or peace and prosperity. With cameraman Kripal Singh in Delhi, Gaurav Sawant for India Today.
The reaction to the PUBG ban in India has been massive. Gaming addicts are mourning the fact that they won't be able to play their favorite game and are now looking for alternatives. Parents, though, are heaving a sigh of relief, hoping that the ban on the game will keep their kids away from their mobile phones. As PUBG continues to trend all across social media, here's a look at how India is reacting.
It's game over for PUBG players in India. From MS Dhoni to young kids, millions of Indians have been addicted to the mobile video game.
Mahi's got a thinking brain, to be honest. He's got a thinking brain, it doesn't rest. So I think when he plays video games, be it Call of Duty and be it PUBG or whatever, I think it just helps him divert his mind.
With the Modi government blocking the mobile game in India, these PUBG addicts are seriously heartbroken. After the centre announced the app ban, PUBG was the top trend on Twitter, with memes flooding the internet. There were also not-so-subtle digs at gamers who've invested thousands of rupees for development and revenue. Jolted out of their virtual reality, the PUBG mobile army is shattered. 15-year-old Andrew Nath is usually glued to his screen, if not on his mobile, then on his desktop. A Class 8 student, he's usually hooked onto his mobile for hours playing PUBG. Andrew says he loves the game because it gives a real-life feeling.
It's kind of different, like it's something realistic, like just like the armies and all the shooting kind of things. Yes, I'm really sad and I will miss this game, of course.
Gamers across the country too agree.
On the negative side, people who depend on gaming for their financial source and people who spend their money on RP faces a real loss.
Upset because it was the only happiness, it was the only pastime in our leisure time. But in the lockdown, we were not able to meet our friends, so we would catch up in this game, and we would talk through voice chat. We could actually make a lot of make a lot of this from this.
I am a bit upset because like PUBG was a better pastime and like it was a very interesting, not basically interesting, very entertaining.
जब लेक्चर खत्म होते हैं तो बहुत बोरिंग लगता है हमें थोड़ी देर के लिए, फिर थोड़ी देर के बाद हम वो खेल लेते हैं गेम तो थोड़ा रिलैक्स हो जाते हैं, पर अब नहीं रिलैक्स हो पाएंगे और सिर्फ पढ़ना पड़ेगा क्योंकि अभी 10th स्टैंडर्ड चल रहा है हमारा हम सबका.
For parents though, the ban on PUBG has come as a huge sigh of relief. Their wish to see their kids away from their mobile phones seems to have been granted, finally.
Whenever in the evening when I am sitting to pray to God, I used to pray that one day I want this game to be banned, and I'm grateful to the government, I'm grateful to my God that it has been banned and many futures will be saved.
It always used to be like parents versus PUBG. So I always used to tell them to just stop playing it because, you know, they used to spend a lot of time on PUBG.
मेरा बच्चा अभी इस साल 10वीं में है तो वो पढ़ाई कर रहा है और पढ़ाई भी ऑनलाइन चल रही है, तो अभी ऑनलाइन पढ़ रहा है कि PUBG खेल रहा है वो पता ही नहीं चलता था, तो अभी PUBG बैन हो गई है तो बहुत ही अच्छा हुआ है, हम रिलैक्स हो चुके हैं.
Parents, teachers, they feel that it was having a really negative impact on young impressionable minds. They would be hooked onto their smartphones for hours and their concentration and in general their lifestyle would go for a toss. With camera person Prabir Biswas, Indrajit for India Today in Kolkata.
Joining us now to talk about how effective is this digital surgical strike, the third round of this intervention, seeing a furious outcry from China. We have Amit Malviya, national spokesperson of the Bharatiya Janata Party, also the party's IT chief cell, squaring off against him. Once again on our show, the Congress's IT chief cell, Rohan Gupta. And we've got Sohit Saxena. He's a gaming enthusiast, big time into PUBG, and I am told that he's mighty disappointed with the fact that PUBG has been banned. So let me start with Sohit. Sohit, you know, we've got on the line of actual control the Chinese army looking to intrude into Indian territory, and India needs to send a firm resolve. And in that context, the Modi government has decided to ban these 118 apps. Why is it that you are disappointed? Why is it that you believe that this is a bad idea, Sohit?
It was really shocking. I was not expecting it at all. Like, this game is pretty big here. It's like a pillar of strength of our Indian gaming community. And there are lots of YouTube channels and streamers and gaming tournaments who are happening because of this game. And mobile gaming is pretty huge in India. And I think the Indian government should not do it abruptly, or they shouldn't have done it like in such a suddenness. They should have talked with the company or resolved it. And I think linking it with the Chinese army issue this game shouldn't be linked with that. I hope people say that it's a kind of a security threat. If it is, then the government should have made some talks or, you know, laid out some guidelines. Now it's banned, so I just hope that some Indian version of it develops, or we switch to some other alternatives.
Okay.
And like Modi recently tweeted about.
So let's get Amit Malviya to respond to this. You're saying A, there was no forewarning. B, it had been around for so long. Why suddenly ban it? There are 175 million plus downloads. there's an entire generation that's coming up, Mr. Malviya, that's addicted to PUBG. They're saying, how can you do this so suddenly, and what does a video game have to do with what the Chinese army is doing? Respond to Sohit and all those who are disappointed. Amit Malviya.
Some of the others, and in fact there are a lot of them, who have been using these games or these apps. However, what we've got to understand is that what's happening at the borders with China can't go on without impacting the kind of business relationships we have with them. And make no mistake, India is a very, very open market. We're a very open economy. We're welcoming of talent. We have people going out and working. So we're very well entrenched in the global business environment and the economic setup. However, it can't be a one-way street. And let's not forget that these apps or popular gaming options or technology interventions that have now come to us have come because China's own ecosystem has developed over a period of time. And it has developed because China has not allowed other countries and their companies to go in. Now, is that the best way to operate in a globalized market like us? Of course it isn't. But what does that decision do? It, A, sends a very clear message to the Chinese that you cannot continue to transgress on border and hope it will be business as usual. And two, it opens up a huge, huge opportunity for Indian developers, for Indian gaming enthusiasts, for technologists and technology companies to come up with similar apps.
No, but the question that Sohit's asking you, Mr. Malviya, is how is this prejudicial to the sovereignty and integrity of India, the defense of India, the security of state and public order, which is the rule under which PUBG is being banned? They're saying, is sabka PUBG se kya lena dena?
Well, the kind of data that was being collected under the garb of identification or KYC and all of these apps were perhaps not being used in a kosher manner. There was threat of data mining. There was threat of too much of information being taken away, which should not have been the case, but it was being done. That's what the government has said, and this decision is a reflection of the commitment to ensure that data privacy and individual security is taken care of, and that's why it has been done. And I think it's only appropriate that governments take these decisions as information comes in and do what is in the best interest of the people. And I'm sure it's a matter of time that we will have a very, very robust gaming ecosystem developed here in India, which will be indigenous and which can actually go global, because we are still open to businesses and companies otherwise. And lastly, Rahul, it also means that some of these companies which have been now banned may have to think of alternate ways of doing business in India, which may not be detrimental to the likes of Sohit and others who use them. Okay. In the current setup that they were, it was probably not the best way to handle
now,
it.
Now, Rohan Gupta, you're of the view that this is not an efficacious idea, that this serves no purpose. Even though there are the likes of Sohit Saxena who are upset, Amit Malviya is spot on when he says that the Chinese companies, the kind of privacy norms they have, the kind of data harvesting they do is way more than A, what is required to get you on the game, and B, more than what companies based out of Europe or America do. So therefore, it's genuinely, to the extent of data privacy and data security, a threat to India, and we need to wake up to that. Rohan Gupta, why are you upset?
See, Rahul, first of all, I feel that Mr. Malviya is confused that what is the objective of this step. If it is retaliation to China, my simple question is what they were waiting for 5 months. It should have been done long back. He says about internal security. Then why this app was allowed in India? So I think both the sides, his logic of banning this app is not justified. Another important thing he was saying, surprisingly, that this will give Indian companies chance to develop the games. Let me remind you, Mr. Malviya, in 2014, 99% of Indian mobile market was dominated by Indian manufacturers. Today, 90% market is dominated by Chinese players. Why this has happened? If you are talking this as a retaliation to Chinese, then why these companies are there in India? IPL still this year, Vivo has been suspended as a sponsor, but they are not out of the panel. So this is the eyewash, Rahul. If you see BJP regime, they have done strategical mistake by depending on China or trusting China. Mr. Modi went to China as a prime minister highest number of times, and what have we received after that? Today, Mr. Modi is not ready to believe that Chinese have entered our territory. What retaliation are we talking about? See, come on, Rahul, we cannot fool the country all the time.
Amit
My simple
Malviya,
question
if
is,
your Prime Minister, one second, if the Prime Minister is on record having said that the Chinese haven't entered Indian territory, but I must tell Rohan Gupta that was in the context only of Galwan when the Prime Minister spoke. He didn't say it generally, but since you've asked the question, let Amit Malviya respond. What then are we retaliating to if there's no problem like your government wants us to believe? Then why is this retaliation being executed? Let Amit Malviya respond to the Congress spokesperson.
Look, Rahul, I did not use the word retaliation at all. I mean, I don't know why the Congress spokesperson heard the word retaliation. Where did it come from? Secondly, he was concerned about the increase of Chinese imports in India. It was because the Rajiv Gandhi Foundation, headed by Sonia Gandhi, took donations from the Chinese embassy here in India, enjoyed the hospitality in Beijing during Olympiad, and then sold the country to the Chinese. In fact, after Prime Minister Modi came in, the number of mobile manufacturing companies in India rose from 2 to 200. Left to the Congress, we would have been today standing with a begging bowl in front of China, and China would have been our masters. He's obviously disappointed that the Gandhis could not execute their plan to the end. And I'm happy that they are out of power, and so is the rest of the country. Now, coming to the more important point about PUBG and why decision has been taken around this and several other apps. There are times in a country's history that we make decisions based on what is right for us. The Galwan Valley, or what's now happening in Pangong Show, is not an isolated instance. These border issues have been festering for as long as we can remember. But the Congress, when they were in power, did not have the gumption to take the Chinese head on. Mr. Modi invested the political capital that he had, tried to talk to them. They did not heed to the overtures. They tried to make inroads in Galwan, which was thwarted. And now the Indians are determined to take over strategic locations that are important to it along the
Okay, Rohan Gupta, there comes a time when you draw a line in the sand and you say enough is enough, this much and no further, and the Indian government believes that this is it. What's wrong if the Prime Minister tries to build bridges with China? It's a reasonable thing to try. It didn't work out. Now he's ensuring that China, the Chinese army, and the Chinese economy and these Chinese companies suffer the consequences.
Rahul, my simple question to you and Mr. Malviya, has Chinese entered India or not? I think this is really, the whole country is watching Mr. Malviya. You are the spokesperson of the party in government and you are lying to the country. There are news that up to 1,000 square kilometers Chinese have entered our territory and you are lying to the country. Then what are you reacting to? If Mr. Modi, there is nothing wrong, Rahul, in trusting or in trying to develop relationship, but you cannot over-depend that. Because of Modi ji, the balance of payment in favor of China has increased manifolds. Our imports from China has increased manifolds. The FDI has increased manifolds. The market which was dominated by Indian player, 90% is by Chinese manufacturers. So the question is, you cannot fool the country. First of all, you have to accept the problem. Yes, Chinese have entered and we are trying to throw them out. But if you cannot accept the problem like your Prime Minister, I think you are fooling the country. And if PUBG or any app was so dangerous, why you have allowed them to come to India? Why you could not take this step of security or other measures when they
straight
came
and
to
direct
India?
question
So
from the Congress spokesperson. Is the Chinese army on territory that you believe is Indian? And if it is, why doesn't the government first accept so? What is it that we're taking this action for?
Look, Rahul, the Congress spokesperson is poorly informed. Imports from China have gone down to the extent of 25% under Modi regime. Can I please speak without interjection? The FDI from China is as low as 1.9%.
No, sir, that's only now. Mr. Malviya, you're weak on facts. Between 2014 and 2019, foreign direct investment from China saw a sharp spurt of a kind which hadn't been seen. Suddenly, Chinese capital, both portfolio, venture capital and FDI became an important source of capital in the Indian markets. That happened on your watch. You can't forget history and you can't now make that data disappear. It's a reality, sir.
Rahul, I'm not for a minute contesting the data that you're pointing out. I'm only saying that it is a very small percentage of the overall FDI that India gets. We have to look at it in that context. It's not even amongst the top 10 FDI destinations that are investing today in us. That is the point that is important and you can't overlook it. And lastly, on whether the Chinese entered the Indian territory or not. Of course, they did not. We've said this so many times.
Rahul.
If the Congress can't understand simple, basic English, then perhaps they need to go back to school. Just because they want to repeat a lie 1,000 times and hope that it will become the truth, that wouldn't be the case.
Rohan Gupta, I want to go back to Sohit, but quick counter. Yes, Sohit.
Really surprised to see BJP spokesperson lying to the country. The whole country knows, the media knows what is the retaliation all about. They have entered our 1,000 square kilometer area. We are talking this, the media, the minister has spoken. Mr. Jai Shankar, what is he talking about? If Chinese have not entered, what situation he was talking about in Ladakh? I think what intrusion he was talking about. Was he lying or Mr. PM lying? This is not done, Rahul. As a party spokesperson who is leading the country, who is in power, this kind of blatant lie are not acceptable. They are not ready to face the situation. They will not face the situation if they not admit the problem. You know, Rahul, that this is the problem with BJP. They are always in denial mode. And because of this denial mode, the country is suffering, whether it is Corona or China. They are not ready to accept the reality that we are in bad situation. We have lost our 20 soldiers. We will not allow that to happen. Why? You are banning the Chinese up? That's okay. What more than that? You cannot do eyewash with the country. One side you are allowing 90% Indian market to be occupied by Chinese, and you are talking about banning Chinese apps. So other side, IPL, still the sponsor is there, Vivo is there as a sponsor. Our imports are increasing. I think you cannot lie to the country.
Okay,
you have to accept
20 seconds because these are direct charges against you. I want to go back to Sohit though. 20 seconds.
Very, very quickly, all I could hear was lying, lying, lying. Obviously, he wants to see that somehow this word sticks to us. But the reality is that the country is watching. Rahul, I would suggest you should send some of your programming that your channel has done to the Congress party spokesperson so that he can watch them and educate them himself. He thinks everybody is like them, thousands of kilometers of land and not bothered. The fact is that not even an inch of Indian territory has been ceded to anybody. And I say this with a lot of responsibility.
you are caught spreading fake news 18 times.
The Congress can continue to come here and...
You are caught spreading fake news 18 times, Mr. Malviya. So country won't trust you anymore.
Okay, Sohit Saxena. Now tell me now, you are...
Nobody will trust you, Mr. Malviya.
Okay, 1 second. Sohit, how many hours in a day did you play PUBG? Now that PUBG is no longer there, what's life looking like? What did you do today? Were you still able to get onto the game? Are you looking at VPN? How are you going to cope? What are you going to do?
Look, Rahul, I'm just a gamer and a consumer, and killing apps and other products would just, kill the competition. I believe this game was a balance to my life. Like I used to play 2 hours at max, and it was like a relaxing time for me. And I believe we would look for other alternatives, and yeah, we're hoping that some other Indian developers would come.
Is there any Indian game that comes close? What's your alternative menu looking like? What else can you spend those 2 hours on?
Look, we would not give up gaming or start studying. A student would start studying because you snatch his mobile away. He would just look for alternative ways to have fun. So yeah, we would look for some alternative games for now. Yeah, but the game was pretty huge, and lots of people have already invested players so much money in this game, and it's a sudden loss for them. Yeah.
Well, this is indeed a big story. Given the huge numbers involved, it's disappointing to the Indian PUBG community, and we feel their pain. But it's also a very strong message to the likes of Tencent, which is the Chinese IT behemoth which owns PUBG. And remember, their valuation to a great extent was riding on the Indian market, which wasn't a big source of revenue, but in terms of numbers, and since downloads and installs are so important in the digital sphere, it was a huge part of the valuation game, and many of these companies were about to list overseas, and this does impact and hit hard. And just imagine, for a few kilometers that the PLA hopes to try and transgress and sit on, billions of dollars of valuation are being destroyed off the the Chinese government's own companies, or companies closely linked with the Chinese company, and then they say the Chinese are good strategists. This is a very, very foolish strategy for the Chinese army and the Chinese government to be following. For the time being, Amit Malviya, Rohan Gupta, Sohit Saxena, you know, I don't want to look down on gaming, but my sense, you know, go out, get a racket, go out, play some cricket, play some basketball, go play some real sport, man.
Yeah, that's on the menu too.
Yeah, you should, you know, go out. It's not so bad. Give it a shot. Go out, play a real sport. Anyway, do whatever you want. It's your life. Live it the way you want. Thanks so much, Sohit Saxena, for joining us. And thanks also Amit Malviya and Rohan Gupta. I want to come back now to what's happening along the line of actual control, where India and China are virtually on a tinderbox. The situation in Ladakh continues to be hugely volatile. The army chief is currently in the area. The air chief took stock of India's defense preparedness yesterday. While military-level talks continue to hit a dead end, the Indian army continues to dominate 6 strategic positions along the line of actual control, sitting on crucial hilltops overlooking important Chinese positions.
The southern banks of the Pangong Lake, now dominated by Indian positions, with Chinese positions in India's line of sight and fully vulnerable to Indian action. But like we also told you first, the Indian Army's actions in the last 6 days in Ladakh aren't restricted to just the south bank of the Pangong. In fact, the Indian Army has moved to take dominant positions along the entire stretch in eastern Ladakh. Apart from the dominant positions on the Pangong south bank, the Indian Army has readjusted its positions across the lake on the north bank's Fingers complex, further north in Hot Springs, and even at the restive Daulat Beg Oldie sector of northern Ladakh that overlooks the Depsang Plains, a sector where China has provoked continuously with a build-up and blockade of Indian patrol teams. Even south of the Pangong south bank, the Indian Army has strengthened its positions in Chumar all the way south to the Demchok sector. But what do these actions actually mean on the ground? To begin with, the Indian Army positions at these strategic heights means it becomes more difficult for China to mount any more aggressive actions. The Indian posts can track Chinese movements far more easily and in real time, with early warning of Chinese build-up and activities. India's dominant positions also allow better forward planning of India's next steps.
The situation in eastern Ladakh remains extremely tense in the backdrop of certain actions taken by the Indian Army to secure territory and provide a tactical ultimatum to the Chinese. While a fragile line of communication still exists between the brigade commanders of the two armies, it's very clear that from here onwards, temperatures are going to rise despite the onset of winter in eastern Ladakh.
With the army chief taking stock of the actions of his troops, India's men on the ground also know they have the full support and backing of the leadership to do what it takes. With Abhishek Bhalla in Leh, Ladakh, Shiv Arur in Delhi for India Today.
The Indian Army thwarting the Chinese aggression on the south banks of the Pangong, moving in, occupying the hilltops, marks a very significant shift in military policy. Instead of waiting and watching and getting stuck in the diplomatic rut asking the Chinese to go back, the army now has gone on the offensive against China. This very clearly reflects a whole new way of thinking where India no longer wants to be in reactive mode and wants to seize the military initiative. Take a look at this story.
Everything has changed here. In just 6 days, decades of standard operating procedure protocol, and the old way of doing things has been consigned to history. The Indian Army is no longer in react mode, no longer waiting for the adversary to make a move, no longer playing it purely defensive. After 4 months of a standoff triggered and peppered with hostile Chinese actions and initiative, the Indian Army's way of doing things has just seen a paradigm shift. And things may never be the same again. Gone is the no first move posture. In 2016, the Indian Army's punitive strikes on Pakistani terror units deep inside hostile territory is seen as the prominent genesis of this shift in protocol. An Indian Army shift from playing pure defender to playing hunter-killer when required.
The Indian Army conducted surgical strikes last night at these launch pads. The operations were basically focused to ensure that these terrorists do not succeed in their design of infiltration and carrying out destruction and endangering the lives of citizens of our country.
While India hasn't conducted surgical strikes per se in Ladakh, the actions that began 6 days ago are by an army that has bid farewell to understandings of the past and assumed a highly proactive first mover role, setting the agenda, imposing costs, preempting enemy action. So what precisely has changed and what are the implications? They are huge. So far in this standoff, while the Indian Army has largely reacted to Chinese aggressions with a defensive posture, in the last 6 days, it has taken aggressive initiative to preempt and thwart Chinese actions. A huge shift on the ground. The wait and watch policy is also now gone, with the Indian Army now acting without delay. The earlier emphasis on talks is now strengthened by actions taken in advance. The institutional emphasis on the border mechanism has been replaced by a reality check on how China has totally destroyed those protocols. Finally, the proactive destruction of Chinese surveillance equipment is for the first time giving the Chinese a taste of their own medicine.
चीन समझता है और जानता है कि हिंदुस्तान की फौज इतनी सशक्त है और नेतृत्व पॉलिटिकल नेतृत्व मौजूदा हालत में इतना स्ट्रांग है कि वो किसी भी देश को दबोच सकता है। तो चीन की कुछ भी मकसद हो और ध्येय हो, चीन उस ध्येय में सफल नहीं हो सकता।
जाहिर है कि चीन चाहेगा कि भारत की सेना की वहां पर कमी हो जाए, इसलिए उसने भी दूसरा फ्रंट खोलने की कोशिश की है। लेकिन भारतीय सेना इसके बारे में पहले ही अवगत है और उन्होंने पूरी तैयारी कर रखी है। अपनी प्लान्स में 2 फ्रंट वार के बारे में पूरा ध्यान दे रखा है और चाइनीज इस अपने मंसूबे में कामयाब नहीं होंगे।
The Indian Army's new actions may have put China on notice, but they've also escalated the situation, with an angry China both stunned and itching to hit back. One thing has been made clear: few things will ever be the same again at the border. With Shivarur, Bureau Report, India Today.
Army Chief General Naravane in Ladakh reviewing military preparedness. Make no mistake, India and China currently sit on a tinderbox. To get a sense of where things could be heading from here on, I'm joined by one of India's leading China experts, Brahma Chalani. He's been advocating for long a more aggressive response to China's military maneuvers along the line of actual control. We've seen through the weekend and through this week the Indian Army dominate up to 30 strategic positions overlooking key Chinese posts. Brahmachalani, what's your sense of the current state of play? How do you think the Indians are poised at this moment, and what, according to you, is China's most likely response? Brahma.
Well, I think the capture of vacant heights in Chushul was a step in the right direction to buttress India's perception of the LAC and to prevent the PLA from grabbing more Indian territory. But India faces a difficult military situation because the Chinese have strengthened their hold on the land grabs that they made in April and May, and evicting them militarily is a difficult option for India. But the action of India since last weekend raises two questions. First, why didn't India take such proactive defensive steps when it first discovered the Chinese encroachments at the beginning of May?
What's your sense of why it didn't happen? Why is it taken all of June, July, August, 3 months for India to go in and make these moves?
4 months. It's been 4 months since the first encroachments were discovered. And because India did not take such proactive defensive steps, it led to newer Chinese encroachments, including in the Depsang Plateau. For example, the Depsang Pai Junction today is in Chinese control. Had we taken such steps earlier, the situation would have been much better. The second question that arises is that we have finally deployed the all-Tibetan Special Frontier Force against the PLA in the Chushul area. The Special Frontier Force was raised in the 1960s for action against China, but it has not seen any action against China all these decades because the Indian governments have kept the Special Frontier Force away from the LAC. Finally, they have been pressed into service. The question is, why didn't we use the Special Frontier Force earlier?
No, what's your answer to that question? You're raising good questions. As one of India's leading experts in China, what are your answers to them?
Well, the answer, India learns from mistakes, but learns slowly. Now, we have seen the valor of the Tibetan commandos of the Special Frontier Force. Their action forced the PLA unit that intruded into the southern side of the Pangong Lake to retreat. And one of the Special Frontier Force company commanders was martyred in the action. Another was wounded. But they have shown their courage. They have shown their ability to stand their ground. This is the kind of force that we need. In fact, local Himalayan people, whether they are Tibetans, Ladakhis, Himachalis, Sikkimese, and Arunachalis, they are best suited to safeguard the Himalayan border.
Now, you track China and what's happening in the mind of the PLA and the CMC leadership very closely. What's your best sense, Brahmachalani, of how the Chinese are likely to respond? They are furious, statement after statement, levying a volley of charges against India. They're threatening retaliation. Is this a strong enough quid pro quo? Will the Chinese now be forced to realize their folly and pull back? Or do you believe that having come so far, to turn around with that tail between their legs and go back would be a loss of face, and therefore an escalation is more likely? How do you see the situation pan out? Brahmachalani.
Well, first, the Chinese have achieved the territorial objectives that they set out to achieve when they made those incursions into Indian territories in April and May. So those territorial gains of China remain intact. In fact, they're consolidating those gains. What is new is that in one sector, in the Chushul sector, the Indians have taken on the PLA openly. So this poses a challenge for China, and especially I think even more humiliating for China is the fact that India pressed the all-Tibetan Special Frontier Force to take on the PLA, and that is really humiliating to China. But the overall picture still remains very favorable to China's aggression. The second point that we have to bear in mind when we consider how China might respond to the latest Indian action since last weekend, we should bear in mind that China has pursued an approach, a policy since the 1980s of committing aggression below the threshold of armed conflict without firing a single shot. That's how they have changed the status quo in multiple areas, including the South China Sea. And that's how they managed to grab territories in Ladakh since April. So now if they try to respond to India's latest actions by shedding that approach and waging military action, then the whole facade that they have created will be shattered. So for China, this is a serious dilemma that they face now, because the whole coercive approach has been based on tactics short of armed conflict.
Okay, whether it stays short of armed
conflict. China now wage armed conflict against India? That's the question.
You know, and for a country that thinks it's the new global superpower, raging a conflict that ends in a stalemate is a global embarrassment. And knocking out India is impossible, and therefore, while it will be bruising for both sides, China now in a real logjam. But make no mistake, this battle for attrition is far from over. Things could get nasty any night. That's how close we are to the line of actual control lighting up. One misstep, that's all it'll take. Let's just hope that better sense prevails and the Chinese go back home where they came from, and that status quo ante is restored. Brahma Chalani for joining me on the Newstrack. Thank you very much. I'm slipping into a break. I'll have more for you when I come back on the other side. Stay with us. We're back in a moment.